like Degeneration X said, are you ready for somebody to have a crack at me about my rankings of Khris Middleton, of Tyus Jones? And I'll fire back. We'll talk DeMar DeRozan, and we'll talk Damian Lillard as well. It is all coming up. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. So it's time for another rankings rumble. It's time for somebody to have a crack at me. It's time for me to have a crack at somebody. I'm going to talk about those four players that I talked about at the beginning. There's going to be mock drafts coming starting today as well. And for the first time, he's coming on this show, and he's going to come in guns blazing, I hope. He's going to be doing fantasy basketball work for Sporting News this season. His name is Sloan Piva. Let's get Sloan in now. Have a chat. All right, here he is for the first time. Sloan Piva, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh. Great to be here.
It is good to have you here for the first time. And as I said before you came on, that you're doing some work for Sporting News this season. So just quickly before we get into it, tell us what you're doing for fantasy basketball for Sporting News.
Yeah, so I'll be handling most of the fantasy basketball content, 9-cat rankings. We'll be doing a couple of mock drafts. We'll be doing some dynasty content as well. But pretty much all the fantasy basketball that we'll be handling over there will be in my control. So very excited to join you here. I've been a long time fan of yours, so happy to come on here and debate some rankings.
Yeah, so let's start it. You've seen my list of players. You've seen and I've seen what you think about guys as well. I'm going to pick two each to have a crack at, and you're going to have a go at me for the first one that I've got here, and it is a player that's impacted by a recent trade. It's Khris Middleton in Milwaukee. So I think it's fair to say, Sloan, that I was pretty interested in Middleton before the trade happened, quite interested in him, especially with that ADP you can see on the screen at 82, and I did drop him down after that trade. But you think I haven't gone far enough? You're like, what's wrong with where I've got Middleton, where I've got him at the moment? I think in like let me just quickly double check this. I think I've got him around where that ADP sits, because I think there is going to be a drop off, yes, but I'm not sure it's going to be. I've got him around 70. I've got him around 70 marks. I don't know how big the drop off is going to be though.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've always been a Khris Middleton guy. I've had him on my dynasty team for many, many years. And I seem to always draft him in redrafts. But this year, I've just kind of talked myself out of him. You know, he's a year older. I think his usage rate is going to go way down with two ball dominant players alongside him. And I worry that he might end up like a Tobias Harris or something, where he's just relied on as a floor spacer. Maybe his minutes go down. Maybe his usage goes down. I also, I wonder about coaching and how, if Adrian Griffin has a run and gun offensive scheme and it wears Middleton out a little too quickly, or maybe he's still lagging because of injuries over the past few years. But there's a lot of different concerns that I can't possibly see myself grabbing him in the top 70, top 75 like I used to. 32 years old, coming off a 33 game season. He's averaged something like 55, 57 games over the past 4 years. In his past two seasons, we've seen him post his worst shooting campaigns. Obviously, he had the injuries that created some of that dilemma, but to me, the cons outweigh the pros with Middleton.
I get that, right? I do understand it. I think I had him probably 10 to 15 spots higher before the trade, and I've dropped him down. But I still think that as far down as you've got him, which I think is in like the 80s or 90s, it's too far. Like, I get that he didn't play very much last season. I also think that games played number is a little skewed because he didn't play at all last season, but pretty sure his other ones were relatively strong. I do worry about his knee, but I also look at this team, and we can talk about two dominant players. They lost Drew Holiday and Grayson Allen also, who are two of the two starters in that group. And I think that the signing of Campaign probably hurts him a little bit more than what some people are thinking, because he won't have as many secondary ball handling responsibilities. But I do think he's going to be staggered quite a bit, and it's either going to be him or even Dame running the second unit. So I don't think we're going to get significant all three of those guys playing all of their minutes, because their bench is like it's Beauchamp and it's Payne and it's maybe Connaughton. Like it's not great options there, and Robin Lopez, maybe Bobby Portis is there, but there is still opportunity for 20 of his 33 minutes, I would guess, to be on the court with only one of Dame and Giannis, not always playing with those guys consistently. And yeah, it was disappointing last season, but I wouldn't, like, I've got him at 70. I probably wouldn't take him inside round 6 just because of the age and a bit of the injury risk there, which those rankings don't necessarily take gigantically into consideration. But once we head into round 7, the other guys who are around that area, I don't have too much of a problem with it. Like, what are you seeing the usage will drop off, but do you think he's going to just not get assists anymore? Do you think he's going to just be like playing fewer minutes when they've got less depth?
I think the assists will go down. I think, just like I said, the shooting percentages bother me. For a guy who's never been known as a huge defensive counting stat guy, if he's averaging 15, 5, and 4,
15. That's a long way down. 15. Come on. That's how far do you think he's dropping down?
Well,
I know he averaged 15 in 24 minutes last year, and yes, there is a Lillard factor there, but that's a big drop.
You make a valid point about the fact that Milwaukee is not deep anymore, and that he will have more shots and he should be healthier this year. So I guess I'm with you on the fact that his floor is higher than maybe I'm arguing, but at the same time, I just wonder, with players who have logged a bunch of playing time and had injuries and not played a bunch over the past few years, what's the upside here? Should I go for an upside at this average draft point, or should I rely on the Middleton of old, or the thought that the Middleton of old will be back just because he's a little healthier now and he's got a better role than he had last year. I just, like I said, I just don't quite trust the usage rate to go back to what it used to be. And I also worry that he's just aging, and with the injuries and everything, and the shooting percentages down, and then the lack of defense, I'll probably fade him in the 70s. I'd probably end up taking him in the mid 80s, but he's not going to fall that far, as you and I know. So
he might though. His ADP was already low, right? And the trade is going to impact him. So I don't think he's going to jump ahead of this. He would have come in significantly from this. He would have started going in the 60s had there not been a Lillard trade, right? He would have come into that. But I'm not sure that he does anymore. I think he probably sticks around this area. There is concern, obviously, with the knee and that injury that impacted him so much last season. But I just think that maybe we are over-focusing on that. I think not you. I think you're over-focusing on that in this one, and I think that the usage drop will happen, but I think that he will drop, but it's going to impact the fifth starter and even the Brook Lopez significantly more, I think, than Middleton will be affected. He's not scoring 20 points a game, which he did for 4 or 5 straight seasons. I don't think he's doing that, but I think there's a big difference between the 15 that he scored last season in 24 minutes, and I think he can be like an 18-point guy at least this season. 18, give you close to 5 assists, 5 rebounds, and we get maybe some shooting percentage improvement. Last season's one, I think I chucked most of that out considering just how stop-start it was for him all year and the low minutes. But yeah, there are definite concerns around him. But I just think that him going into the 90s is it's not what I want to do. But you had another one to have a crack at me, which is one where you're thinking I'm just too low on, and we'll get to that in just a second. because today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. It is football season according to Ibotta. Well, Ibotta, it is basketball season as well. It means pizza, it means wings, it means even buffalo chicken dip. Whatever you prefer at your tailgate, go all out and you can get cash back on every purchase with Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, produce, personal care, pantry goods, so you can make sure that you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. You either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It is that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $100 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or you could use the cash back to buy a flight you've been eyeing, a game you've been dying to go to, or a fancy dinner that you have been craving. Earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers as well, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Download the Ibotta app and use the code LOCKED to start earning real cash back. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use the code LOCKED. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or the App Store and use the code LOCKED. Let's do the next one here, Sloan. And you think that I am, as I talk at the wrong time, you think that I am low on Tyus Jones, the new Washington Wizards presumed starting point guard.
Yeah, I'm big on Tyus. Tyus is one of my favorite sleepers, and I know that's me being a little bit trendy, maybe caught up in the hype, but I've always been big on Tyus. I think he should have had an opportunity to be a starting point guard in this league many years ago. He's filled in admirably every time that he's gotten a chance to in Memphis. He's a great shooter. He's turned into a great shooter. He's led the league in assisted turnover ratio for 5 years now. He's a great creator, good vision, good handle. And so I think he's got a big chance to have a breakout season. Similar to what Fred VanVleet did in 2020. And obviously he's not going to have the shooting and scoring volume that VanVleet enjoyed in that breakout year. But I think if you look at their per 36 numbers over the past few, or like if you compare Tyus Jones per 36 numbers over the past couple of seasons to Fred VanVleet around when he broke out, it's very similar. And like I said, you're not going to have the scoring volume or the shooting volume. He's not going to be as dynamic a fantasy player as Fred VanVleet, but I do think that Tyus Jones is going to greatly outweigh his ADP, and I'm grabbing him in as many places as I can, at least way ahead of where you had him ranked. I think a new opportunity in Washington, and he's got a career average of 10 assists and under 2 turnovers per 100 possessions. And he's good for 2 steals a game pretty much every time. Sometimes he'll even have 4 or 5 steal games, and that kind of impact can win you a week in 9-cat. So I tend to put a lot of value in defensive stats. I tend to put value in assists, and I go for builds like that. But
all right, so
either way, I think
you put a lot of value in defensive stats. He had 6 blocks for the entirety of last season. 6, the whole season. So defensive stats aren't they're not just but that's not just defensive stats. So he averaged 1 steal a game last year in 24 minutes a night. We assume he's going to play more than that, but how much do we know he's going to play? Like we saw Monte Morris come in last season, who has a unbelievably similar profile to Tyus Jones, one of the best assist to turnover point guards in the NBA. I think he's probably second to Tyus Jones in that area, and had Delon Wright backing him up. And he played like 28 minutes a night under the same head coach. I'm not to say that they would be doing the same thing here. And I think Tyus probably plays a little bit more than what Monte Morris does. And for reference, like you've got Tyus in the 60s. I've got him in the mid to late 80s because I saw what he did in Memphis and it was really strong. And as a starter, I've got the numbers: 33 minutes a night, 16, 4, and 8 with 1.8 steals. They're unbelievable numbers, Sloan. Like no one is going to debate that. They're awesome. He shot 50% from the field. I just also think it's pretty fake. I just don't think he's going to be able to do that at that level. I don't think he's going to average. Banking on someone averaging 1.8 steals is pretty tough to do. He's never been He's never been close to that sort of a player, even on a per minute basis. His per 36 numbers were 2 steals per 36 as a starter, but they were 1.3 as a bench player. And they were 1.5 the year before that, 1.9, 1.7 in really low minutes. So it's hard for me to expect him to do that. And the other thing is, what's his offensive role going to be? Like when he started with Memphis, and I've said this on this show many times, he would start next to Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson, right? Who the hell else handled the ball there? Who was running things? In Washington, Jordan Poole's going to have the ball in his hands tons. So it's not a 1-for-1 crossover number. I've got no problem taking a starting point guard is strong, especially when you're getting assists. I just don't know how, as an unrestricted free agent on a tanking team, how much are they investing in him?
Well, you make a good point about Jordan Poole being ball dominant and not taking away from some of his assists. But I think Jordan Poole's also learned how to play off ball too. So I think he's still going to have an upside as an assist man.
Look, he'll get assists. There's no question he's going to get assists. I think part of it is is he going to play 34 minutes or is he going to play 30 minutes and then they work some minutes with Jordan Poole at point guard? There's Johnny Davis, who maybe they play. I don't know. Dylan Wright is still there. How do they get all those guys minutes, especially when we saw the way they deployed Monte Morris last season?
Well, I just think that the offense under Monte Morris wasn't really clicking. They didn't really have much of an identity. And I think that's why they went out and got Tyus Jones. I mean, he's able to bring some of what he learned in Memphis in that great offense and take it over and be a leader of sorts and make the players around him better. And I think there's a lot of raw potential in Washington. And I think that we see a lot of their potential tapped with him flourishing as a starter. We've seen every opportunity that Tyus has to be a starter, to get consistent longer minutes, he's played better. And then, there's always been players like that need more playing time to really flourish. And when you bring them off the bench, they just don't have anywhere near the kind of per minute impact as when they're starters. So I think just from start to finish, having him in that starting point guard role, I think he's going to absolutely return his investment.
So you would take him ahead of Khris Middleton, is what you're telling me?
Yeah, I think I would take him ahead of Middleton. Yeah, because I just think I think that he's just going to have a better 9-cat impact, and he's younger, and I'm just not as worried about rest games or time off or injury risk, which are all concerns that I have with Middleton.
I get that. All right. I'm looking at this at the moment because I don't know if you'd looked it up. How Tyus played when he played alongside Ja Morant last season. Did you have any look at that? Because I'm looking it up now. I just want to see, because not that Ja and Jordan Poole are the same players, obviously, but we know that Ja is a high usage guy who handles the ball, and Jordan Poole is a bit of a similarity between those guys. And have a look. Tyus Jones played 365 minutes next to Ja last season, had a usage of 14%, and he had an assist rate of 6.2 per 100 possessions, which is well down from the 10.5 per 100 possessions and the 17% usage he had for the entirety of the season. Again, Ja and Poole aren't the same, but I don't think it's outrageous to suggest that Ja and Poole might have similar usage rates this season.
Yeah, and it's possible, but I think Poole is also, relies a lot more on his outside shot.
That's
and
true.
I think that Tyus will create a lot more opportunities for Jordan to have open looks. Not that he's an extremely talented penetrator, but I think they'll work in a lot of pick and roll, a lot of pick and pop, and I think that he will space the floor. I think Poole's gonna space the floor as a shooter, and Tyus is gonna space the floor as a ball handler. And like you said, Morant's a completely different guy. Morant has the ball in his hands. A lot of the times in that Taylor Jenkins offense, they needed Morant just to make a play, just to get something going. Because Jaren Jackson is an incredibly talented player, but he's not a go-to offensive threat. So a lot of the times when things got stagnant, they relied on Ja to just be an athletic specimen, which he is. And you're not going to have that in Washington.
I think you're proving my point for me that when Tyus had to fill in for Jari, he had to do that, but he won't have to do that in Washington. So there you go. All right, I'll take the win on that one. That he's going to be he'll be playing as a secondary role because he doesn't need to do that creation stuff. We'll get into talk about two other ones here in just a second. I'm excited to talk about these next ones because DeMar DeRozan is someone that people are going to criticize me on a lot, but I want to have a crack at you. DeRozan has an ADP at the moment of 48. All right, I am not particularly high on DeRozan. I'm not that far off that. I'm in sort of the late 50s with him in terms of his value, but you are a lot higher on where you sit with DeRozan. If you're going to have concerns about age, like with Middleton, like DeRozan is older than Middleton, but I'm just looking at your number. You're actually lower than me on DeRozan. Okay, so here we go. I'm looking at it the wrong way. You're actually way lower. You got him at 78. All right. Is this an age thing that we're talking about here?
Yeah, apparently I've become an ageist. I don't know how this happened because I'm 38. You'd think I was a 25-year-old. Granted, that's a little bit lower than I probably will end up on him. But it's just when I was looking at the split stats and looking at how last season sort of shaped out, it's the last few months of that season last year told us that Zach LaVine is the guy who's really going to take over in this offense. And I think that it's not just because DeRozan hit a wall. I think it's also that's just the way that Donovan and the coaching staff kind of went towards the end. And I can't trust, buying into him too early if it's going to be anything like what we saw in February, March, and April, and the early part of April.
Yeah.
He's one of only 12 active or 11 active players now that's played 1,000 games. He's got the exception on the rest rule, so he's going to be probably resting at this point in his career. And he's not a volume 3-point shooter. He's improved as a 3-point shooter, but he's still not getting you threes more than like maybe 1 or 2 a game tops. He doesn't play defense well. I do like his efficiency as a shooter and as a free throw shooter, but I just don't see the upside anymore, and I just worry about the cliff with 32, 33-year-old guys.
I do worry about. I thought that I was low on him, having him in the 50s, but look, that's a big drop. Now, I agree with what you said in terms of the way that the offense switched towards LaVine at the end of last season. DeRozan averaged under 22 points per game over the final 24 games of the season, despite playing 36 minutes a night and despite shooting 49% from the field. So it's not like he just had a massive drop-off in his shooting numbers or anything like that they were fine. He got to the line 6 times, although the free throws were down to 83, which is something to monitor. But having him like that is obviously that means you're never going to draft him. Like, no, he's never going to fall there. He's probably never going to fall to me in that mid-50s range either. I just think that until I do fear a drop off. Absolutely, that is always going to be a concern with these guys. But that is just that's very low, man. That's very low on DeRozan. I'm just not sure. While I do agree with you, I'm just not sure that we see that go down. Or you just once you hit 30, you're just like, well, I'm just relying upon the younger guys now.
Well, I think a lot of it is that, sometimes I just drop people in my rankings if I don't plan on drafting them. So like you said, there's no way I'm going to bag DeRozan where I have him ranked, where we're the rankings that we're currently talking about. There's no way he's going to drop. So I just avoid him. So if I drop a guy just in my rankings just because I'm completely out on him, then that's part of it. But, 34-year-old who's coming off two seasons of 36 minutes a game and shot really wasn't dropping in the last few months of the year last season. And, the usage rate went down so much. LaVine has leapfrogged him, and without shooting volume and without usage, what is DeRozan to us? We could argue that he's going to probably rack up more assists than last year.
Maybe.
He became a really good passer. in his San Antonio Spurs years. And that really made him a more alluring 9-cap fantasy player. But at the same time, if he hits that 34-year-old wall and he falls under that participation policy exception, he's not going to get docked for sitting out games. He's not going to get docked for resting on back-to-backs. If you have all those things dinging his ceiling and dinging his upside, how can you possibly trust him at the points where he used to be drafted or where he's been drafted so far leading up to this year? I just think he's getting older, slower, still can't play defense, and isn't going to get you 3-point shots. So I'm just out on him.
I agree with a lot of that. Again, there are some places where he's ranked up in the 30s, which is insane. He's ADP at 48. I can sort of get behind it. In the 50s where I got him, okay. I don't think there's any risk of him sitting out, to be honest. He's never had any injuries really in his career. I don't think that's going to be something that he just takes advantage of. He doesn't do that. But I do agree on most of those other points. I just wouldn't be having him below Tyus Jones at this point. But let's go to another old guy because you hate old people. Sloan, let's talk about another player that was involved in that trade. Let's talk about Damian Lillard. His ADP is 11 at the moment. I've got him as a first-round player. You do not. Now, that does not seem like a big deal. Like where you've got him around 16. I've got him, if I double-check, I think is at like 9 or 10. I got him at 10. 6 spots isn't a big deal, but it is at that point of the draft. That's quite a significant difference. Neither of us know how the usage hierarchy is going to play out between Dame and between Giannis, but we both know that they're high usage players. I assume both think that Giannis is the better player there. I have dinged Lillard in terms of free throw rate, in terms of usage, even with some of his assist numbers, which were quite high last season. I've dropped them down, but I don't think that we need to be looking at him dropping that far down. Like he was very comfortably a first-round player last season. And you've got, like a name you mentioned before, you've got Fred VanVleet as someone who's ahead of him on this list. Like, how much do you think that this is going to ding him down? Like, obviously, significantly, because to go from a first-round player to a mid-second it's not a small change in a player's value.
Well, we've seen Dame go 10th and 11th in some drafts as the guy on his team, as the number one undisputed guy in Portland, and now playing with one of the more higher usage ball dominant players in Giannis. I just think his numbers are going to go down quite a bit. And I'm usually a Dame guy. I love Damian. He's got a hell of a shot. Amazing handle, creates, good passer. But I just there's so many other guys that I think have higher upsides. And there's also the age-old issue of age and injury risk. So I just wonder if playing in an offense under Adrian Griffin, a guy who has coached Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, Russell Westbrook, run and gun point guards, if he's going to run him into the ground, are we not going to get the value back on our first round investment if we grab him in the top 12? I just, to me, there's too many question marks. If he gets seriously or legitimately hurt again, if he plays too much, runs into a 33-year-old wall, again, not an ageist but just a realist, and sharing the rock with an MVP and fellow all-star for the first time in his career, unless you want to talk about CJ. But
CJ was never an all-star, so I don't think we need to worry about that.
Oh, that's true. So yeah, this is the first time that he's had to share the rock with a real, honest to goodness go-to offensive threat.
He was so good, though, last season that there is plenty of scope for him to drop off from where he was at that spot last season, where he was comfortably a first-round guy. Like, I've got him scoring 4 or 5 fewer points per game. I've got him dropping in terms of free throw attempts down by almost 3 per game. Like, he was going 11 free throws a game over the final 31 games. He was like the number 2 ranked player, averaging 36, 5, and 7.5, and no one expects him to do anything. Hang on, is that number right? He averaged 36 points per game last season in the final 31 games of the year. That's crazy. Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. That's an insane number. He's not going to do that, right? But that's what I'm talking about. Like, when you're sitting at that level, there's so much room to go down and still be really good. And if you're worried about age, like, you've got guys like Durant and Steph ahead of him, but he outperformed both of those guys on a per-game basis last season. And I do agree. Look, he's going to lose shot opportunities. He's going to lose free throw attempts. I'm pretty confident. He probably loses some assist numbers, but not necessarily. Like, you know, when you're feeding Giannis for pick and rolls and alley-oops, like, instead of hitting him to Yusuf Nurkic, you're hitting him to Giannis, might actually help your assists there. I just think that putting him down into that second, like, yes, drop him. Like, I think I had him 7th beforehand, and I've dropped him to like 9 or 10. I've dropped him to 10, end of the first round. I just don't see huge risk in taking him in that area. The injury he had last year was fake. It wasn't a real injury, so I'm not worried about that. The abdominal one was something that had been bothering him for like 6 years, and he had that surgery finally 2 years ago. But otherwise, he's been relatively healthy. He missed like 6 games or so in November, but otherwise he just played through until they shut him down with a fake injury at the end of the season. So I'm not that worried about him in terms of health, and I'm not worried about I am worried about a significant drop-off. I just think he was so far ahead of so many of those other guys that it shouldn't matter that much.
Yeah, and he's not a guy that is, you know, it's not like Middleton or DeRozan where I'm just avoiding him at all costs. I could see a situation where I would, if it complemented my first round pick, especially, I would pick him 13th or 14th. But, you know,
do you think there's a chance of that? Do you think he can fall? Because ESPN's got him at 13 at the moment, ADP. Yahoo's 11, Fantrax is 12. I think it probably does start to push down into that area, to the 14, 15 area, where, you know, the consensus guys tend to be Kyrie, Anthony Davis in that 12, 13, Sabonis sometimes, but that's more for points leagues. Who's the other guy that's normally, I said Kyrie. Yeah, those guys are sort of, you know, even Devin Booker jumps into that area. Do you think it's possible that we see him in that 14, 15 zone by the time we get to a week before the season starts?
I think it is possible. Not consensus maybe, but I think in a bunch of drafts, people are gonna think, you know, what's gonna happen to his usage rate? Are we drafting him with the assumption that he's gonna score 30 a game again? Are we drafting him with the assumption that his assists go up? The defensive stats will not be there.
No.
And, you know, the 3-pointers are huge, and the free throw percentage is huge. But I don't see him as a top 12 value, just because I think Giannis is going to eat so much out of his usage and out of his scoring that it's going to take a big chunk out of what we've come to know as value for Dame.
It is going to be really interesting to see, and of course the trade has shaken up 2 of the names we've got on this list today, on the show today, Khris Middleton and Damian Lillard, and how that impacts them. But this is part of why, yeah, we love fantasy. We don't know what's going to happen. We try and project it, and we have reasons and we have thought processes behind it, but we'll find out over the course of the next 30 weeks or so, as we head towards the NBA playoffs and we see how everything has played out, and that puts us in that position. So Sloan, first of all, thank you for coming onto the show and picking apart some of my numbers and being a good sport while I did that with some of yours. And let's see what people think. Again, we none of us know. We don't know what's going to happen, and any of these things could transpire in many different ways. Sloan, thank you again for coming on. What have you got that's coming out at Sporting News in the coming days?
Yeah, so if you watch out for me on Sporting News, I'm going to be dropping my rankings, and then we'll be dropping a mock draft, and also I'll have some Dynasty content coming out for rookie drafts, as well as the Dynasty rankings, top 150. So just keep an eye out there. Follow me on Twitter at Sloan Piva, and we'll have a lot of good content for you. And of course, we'll also have some football as well. American football, that is. Go
check out all of Sloan's stuff at Sporting News and follow him over on Twitter. Sloan, thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much, Josh.
And that will do it for me today. Don't forget, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app, and on YouTube. Thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.